April 1992, a young man from a well-to-do East Coast family hitchhiked to Alaska and walked alone into the wilderness north of Mount McKinley. 4 months later, his decomposed body was found by a party of moose hunters. Never before seen footage was found at the site of his death. This, in combination with a series of interviews with people he met along the way, will hopefully bring some clarity into the complex story of this young man's situation and the motives behind the moniker he used.
Chris was a boy of mystery. He could be seen as a normal kid. Although he kept to himself, he was intelligent, hardworking, got good grades, and was held to the highest standards by his parents. Despite his privilege, it became apparent that within him something was missing. Through his adventures, he created an alter ego for himself, going by the name of Alex. The name Alex represented everything that was missing from his upbringing. It allowed him to express a side of him that was independent from society and fostered the development of a strict moral code.
As soon as Chris walked out the door, he became Alex.
I never understood why Chris left. He seemed to flourish at school, and he could easily hold a job. He had so much going for him. I guess we never realized it, but looking back now, there's always something missing.
You could always say that Alex was always inside Chris. He just needed the right environment to come out. Once he got a taste of freedom, there was no way he could return back to society.
I saw Chris at a party after sophomore year at Emory, and it was obvious he had changed. He seemed very introverted, almost cold. When I said, "Hey, good to see you, Chris," his reply was cynical. "Yeah, sure, that's what everybody says." It's hard to get him to open up. His studies were the only thing he was interested in talking about. Social life at Emory revolved around fraternities and sororities, something Chris wanted no part of.
There were many factors that contributed to Chris wanting to leave society. And, I think one of the major factors was his struggle against our dad, Walt. Walt and Chris had these really similar personalities, but one thing that Chris just hated was control. And I think parental control in any form would have caused Chris to leave the house. This control of our dad really caused Chris to not want to associate himself with the family, and learning more about our dad's past and his faults really wanted Chris not to be a McCandless. So he developed his own identity.
The most frustrating thing about him is that he didn't like to be told what to do. It's as if Chris's standard of living was not comparable with society. He got his work done, but it was clear he wanted to be somewhere else. Chris was able to get his job done. He was a good worker, real dependable. He had a weird thing with socks. He hated wearing them even though he had to. The second his shift was up, he would take them off, probably to show us that we didn't own him.
The thing that struck me most about Alex was his intelligence. He was wise beyond his years. Heck, the kid was smarter than me. He carried around stacks of books about nature. It seemed like he knew everything there was to know about the world. He was definitely an old soul, that's for sure.
When I first saw Alex, I thought I was picking up a nutcase. But it turns out I actually really liked the kid. But he was stubborn as hell. I offered him food, I offered him clothing, but he didn't take any of it. He looked unprepared as hell. But I think it was 'cause he didn't want no help from anybody. And when he went out in those woods, he wanted to be alone. And that's the way he was. He didn't need people. Larry, the big one.
I'll have to be honest, when I first met Alex, I thought he was throwing his life away. He was such a bright young man who seemed to be doing little to nothing productive, and I hate to see that potential little waste. He almost had an arrogance to himself. His demeanor was that he could live off the earth with no fear of retribution for his actions. Although, upon further talking, I was shocked by his philosophy on on life. He was wise beyond his years, and his personality was so unusual that I could not help but be drawn to him. Every meeting with Alex made me question my reality and why I live the way I do. And soon I grew to understand that Alex adopted such an unusual way of living because he was searching for something in his life. I remember one day I asked Alex if I could adopt him as my son when he got back from his Alaskan adventure. He responded, "We will talk about it when I get home from Alaska, Ron." After this, I could tell that there's something wrong. My outreach of human intimacy was too much for Alex, and this scared him off.
People, let me tell you about my best friend. He's a warm-hearted person who loved me till the end. People, let me tell you about my best friend. He's a one-boy cuddly toy, my up, my down, my right.
So, son, I've been meaning to ask you a question. Can I adopt you as my son?
We'll talk about it when I get back.
No. All I wanted was my son back.
Jack London is king. He was right. Alaska is amazing. I love it here. I wanted movement and not a calm course of existence. I wanted excitement and danger and the chance to sacrifice myself for love. I felt in myself a superabundance of energy which found no outlet in our quiet life. Everything had changed suddenly. The tone, the moral climate, you didn't know what to think, whom to listen to. As if all your life you had been led by the hand like a small child, and suddenly you were on your own. You had to learn to walk by yourself. There was no one around, neither family, nor people whose judgment you respected. At such a time, you felt the need of committing yourself to something absolute. Life for truth or beauty, of being ruled by in place of the man-made rules that had been discarded. You needed to surrender to some such ultimate purpose more fully. Rather than love, than money, than fame, give me truth. I sat at a table where rich food and wine in abundance, in obsequious attendance, but sincerity and truth were not. And I went away hungry from the inhospitable board. The hospitality was as cold as the ices. Love one's neighbor, which is the supreme form of vital energy. Once it fills the heart of man, it has to overflow and spend itself. And then the two basic ideals of modern man. Without them, he is unthinkable. The idea of free personality and the idea of life as sacrifice. Happiness is only real when shared. In his last days, Alex turned back to Chris because he realized he needed help and became dependent on others.